The lake house had always been our family's crown jewel. Perched on the edge of Lake Windsor, its weathered cedar shingles and wraparound porch had graced countless family photos and holiday cards. 3 generations of Winters had spent summers there, watching sunsets paint the water gold while plotting their futures. I adjusted my blazer, simple, black, tasteful, as I walked into the lawyer's office. My sister Audrey was already there, of course, wearing something designer and inappropriate for a will reading. Dad sat beside her, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, while Mom dabbed dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. They were nothing if not committed to appearances. "Catherine," Dad nodded curtly, "you're late." "By 2 minutes," I replied, taking a seat across from them. Traffic from the airport. Still flying commercial. Audrey wrinkled her nose. God, that must be awful. I didn't bother telling her I'd flown private, my company's jet. Not that they knew about it. They all thought I was still struggling along at my little tech startup, trying to make it in a man's world. That's what Dad always called it, usually while suggesting I come work for him instead. Mr. Davidson, the family lawyer, cleared his throat. "Now that everyone's here, we can begin." He adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, shuffling papers importantly. "As you know, we're here to discuss the distribution of assets following Harold Winter's retirement." "Semi-retirement," Dad corrected quickly. "I'm just restructuring things." "Right, because having a stroke last month and being forced to step down was all part of his master plan. Of course," Davidson continued smoothly, "the main item of discussion is the distribution of property, specifically the Lake Windsor estate." Ah, there it was, the real reason for this meeting. The lake house had been in our family for generations, passed down from father to son until my grandfather had the audacity to only produce my father, who in turn had the misfortune of having 2 daughters. "I've given this a lot of thought," Dad began, using his CEO voice, the one that had terrorized boardrooms for 30 years. "The lake house is a significant responsibility. It needs someone who understands its heritage." I bit back a smile. Heritage. That's what he called the country club memberships, the summer yacht parties, the careful cultivation of the right sort of connections. Never mind that the property had been mortgaged to the hilt 5 years ago when his company hit troubled waters. Waters he'd refused to see coming. "Therefore," he continued, "it's decided. Audrey deserves the lake house more." Audrey preened, already mentally redecorating. Mom sniffed appropriately into her handkerchief. "After all," Dad added, looking at me, "you're so busy with your project in the city. You wouldn't have time for the responsibilities of maintaining such a property." My project, my rapidly growing tech company that had revolutionized artificial intelligence in healthcare. The one that had made me a billionaire before 40. Not that they'd bothered to read any of the business news articles about it. Besides, Audrey smirked, I'd practically live there already. All those charity events I host, the connections I maintain, the wild parties you throw when Dad's not looking, I supplied helpfully. The ones that got written up in the gossip columns last summer. She flushed. That was a networking event. If you say so. I opened my laptop, typing in my password. But before we proceed, there's something you should probably know about the lake house. What's to know? Dad waved it dismissively. I'm giving it to Audrey. The decision's made. Actually, I turned my screen around. You can't give away something you don't own. The property records filled the screen. Clear, official, undeniable. Owner, Catherine Winters, as of 5 years ago. What? What is this? Dad's face went from confident to confused to alarming red in seconds. Property records, I said calmly. From when the bank was about to foreclose. Remember that summer, Dad? When the company was in trouble and you'd leveraged everything, including the lake house? Mom's handkerchief dropped to the floor. Audrey's perfect mouth hung open unattractively. That's impossible, Dad sputtered. The bank. We worked something out. No, Dad. I worked something out. I bought the mortgage. Paid it off. Transferred the deed to my name. All while you were busy telling everyone you'd handled it like always. Mr. Davidson cleared his throat again. I can confirm these records are accurate. The Lake Windsor property has been under Miss Catherine Winter's ownership for the past 5 years. But why didn't you say anything? Mom finally found her voice. Would you have listened? I met her eyes. When have you ever listened to me about anything important? The silence that followed was heavy with decades of dismissed achievements and ignored warnings. You can't do this. Audrey stood up, her designer dress rustling dramatically. Daddy, tell her she can't do this. Actually, she can, Davidson interjected. And given that the property's mortgage history shows multiple missed payments before Ms. Winter's acquisition, she quite possibly saved it from bank possession. I closed my laptop quietly. I've maintained the property, paid the taxes, even kept on old Mr. Jenkins as groundskeeper. Though I doubled his salary and gave him health insurance. You've been paying Jenkins? Dad looked like he might have another stroke. But I've been sending him checks, which he's been returning to your account. I finished. On my instructions. I wanted to see how long it would take you to notice. 5 years, Dad. 5 years of checks being returned, and you never once checked the accounts. Mom started crying then. Real tears this time, not the decorative kind she usually employed at country club functions. But what about my summer parties? Audrey wailed. My social connections? You mean the parties that almost got the property seized by the police twice? I raised an eyebrow. The networking events that led to 3 lawsuits I quietly settled. She sank back into her chair, suddenly looking very young and very lost. The lake house isn't a toy, I said quietly. It's not a status symbol or a party venue. It's the last piece of our real family heritage, before everything became about appearances and social climbing. And I protected it, just like I tried to protect the company before Dad stopped listening to my warnings about digital transformation. My company is fine, Dad snapped, but without his usual conviction. Your company's stock dropped 60% last quarter, I corrected. You're losing market share to tech-focused competitors, which is why I bought controlling interest last week. That was the other bomb I'd planned to drop today. Might as well get it all out at once. You what? Dad gripped the armrests of his chair. We can discuss the company later. I stood up, gathering my things. For now, let's focus on the lake house. I'll have my assistant send over the summer schedule. You're all still welcome to use it, under proper supervision, with signed agreements about liability and behavior expectations. Like children, Audrey spat. You're treating us like children. No, I headed for the door. I'm treating you like the irresponsible adults you've proven yourselves to be. Mr. Davidson will send over the paperwork. Oh, and Audrey? The next time you want to throw a networking event, try actually networking. Your Instagram followers don't count as business connections. I left them there, surrounded by their shattered assumptions and crumbling pride. Through the window, I could see the lake in the distance, its waters calm and unchanging. just like the truth I'd been protecting all these years. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't just owning something, it's being the only one who truly understood its value in the first place. The drive to the lake house felt different now that everything was in the open. My Tesla glided silently along the familiar curves of Lake Windsor Road, past the gates that now had my company's security system discreetly installed. Mr. Jenkins waited at the end of the driveway, his weathered face breaking into a warm smile. "Miss Catherine," he touched his cap. "They've been calling non-stop." I expected as much. I handed him a coffee, his usual order from the artisan roaster in town. "Any actual emergencies?" "Well," he chuckled, "Miss Audrey tried to get in with a moving van this morning. Said she was claiming her rightful property before you could change the locks." "Which were already changed last week," I finished, remembering the security update notification on my phone. "How did she take it?" "Had quite a fit. Threatened to call the police until I showed her the new property registration and security protocols. Then she peeled out in that fancy car of hers, spraying gravel everywhere." He shook his head. "Your father showed up about an hour ago. He's waiting on the porch." Of course he was. Dad had always treated the lake house's wraparound porch like his personal throne room, holding court while overlooking his domain. Except it wasn't his domain anymore. "Thanks, Howard. Take the afternoon off. Full pay, of course." "Actually," he hesitated, "I'd rather stay, in case they come back." I nodded, understanding his loyalty. He'd watched me grow up here, had taught me to fish off the private dock while Audrey complained about the smell. He'd been the one to quietly alert me when Dad started missing mortgage payments 5 years ago. Dad stood as I approached, trying to maintain his CEO posture despite the slight tremor in his left hand, a remnant of the stroke that he pretended hadn't changed everything. "Catherine," he began, then stopped, taking in my appearance. The simple blazer he'd mocked earlier was Armani. The practical flats were Louboutin. Small details that spoke of wealth. Real wealth, not the leveraged lifestyle he'd maintained. "You look successful," he said finally. "I am successful, Dad. You just never bothered to notice." He sank into one of the handcrafted Adirondack chairs, the ones I'd had specially made by local artisans, replacing the gaudy imported furniture Audrey had insisted on. "The company," he said, staring out at the lake. "You really bought controlling interest. 47% of voting shares." I took the chair opposite him. "Another 15% in proxy agreements with board members who've lost faith in the current leadership." "Lost faith?" His voice cracked. "I built that company. And then you stopped building, stopped innovating, refused to see that the market was changing." I pulled out my tablet, bringing up the company financials. "Look at these numbers, Dad." "Really look at them." He did, and I saw the moment reality finally broke through his denial. The declining profits, the market share bleeding to tech-focused competitors, the innovation gap that was becoming a chasm. "It's not too late," I said quietly. "The company has good bones, a strong foundation. It just needs to evolve." "Under your leadership," he said bitterly. "Under competent leadership. Something you used to understand before you started caring more about your golf handicap than quarterly R&D reports." That hit home. He'd missed 3 board meetings this year alone, all for golf tournaments. And the lake house, he gestured around us. Was this just another hostile takeover? No, Dad. This was me protecting our real legacy. The one place in our family that still meant something true. I stood up, walking to the porch railing, Remember teaching me to sail out there? Before Audrey turned the boat dock into a floating cocktail bar, he smiled despite himself. You were a natural. So focused, so determined to understand every detail. The same way I was focused on warning you about the company's tech gaps, about the market shifts you ignored. The smile faded. Catherine, I tried to tell you, Dad. For years I tried. But you and Audrey were too busy playing aristocrats to see what was happening. The missed mortgage payments, the declining market share, the competitors eating away at your core business. So you just took over? Secretly bought everything out from under us? No, I turned back to face him. I built something of my own first, made my own fortune, my own name. Then I protected what mattered while you were busy pretending nothing needed protecting. My phone buzzed, a notification from the security system. Audrey's back. With Mom this time. The Mercedes swept up the driveway moments later, gravel crunching under expensive tires. Mom emerged first, still dadding at her eyes. Audrey stormed up the steps, designer heels dangerous on the wooden boards. Did you change the dock access codes too? She demanded. My friends are coming this weekend for the regatta. You mean the illegal poker games you've been hosting on my boat? I raised an eyebrow. The ones that violated 3 state gambling laws. She deflated slightly. Those were networking opportunities. They were stupid risks that could have cost us everything. Again, I pulled out another tablet, bringing up surveillance photos. Like these little gatherings? The ones with certain controlled substances being passed around. Mom gasped. Audrey went pale. I've spent 5 years protecting this property, I continued. From bank seizure, from police raids, from your networking disasters. And now, I gestured around us. Now it's going to be what it was always meant to be. A family legacy, not a party venue. But it's summer. Audrey wailed. The social season is canceled, I finished. At least your version of it. The lake house will still host events. Charity fundraisers. Real ones, not tax write-offs. Environmental symposiums. Youth sailing programs. Sailing programs? Dad looked up sharply. Like the ones you used to run. I nodded. Before everything became about status instead of substance. Mom sank into a chair, looking around like she was seeing the place for the first time. The carefully maintained gardens. The historic architecture preserved instead of modernized. The subtle security systems protecting it all. You've been maintaining everything, she said softly. All this time. Someone had to, I replied. Someone had to remember what this place really meant. Audrey opened her mouth, probably to protest again, but a commotion from the driveway interrupted her. A group of kids, maybe 12 or 13, were piling out of a van marked Lake Windsor Youth Sailing Academy. Right on time, I checked my watch. The first class of the summer program. Summer program? Dad stood up, watching the kids excitedly pulling on life jackets. You're really teaching kids to sail? Yes, starting with those who could never afford lake access before. I smiled at Howard, who was already heading down to help with the boats. Some things are worth more than social status, Dad. Some legacies are about more than just money. The kids' laughter carried across the water, bright and real and full of possibility, just like the lake house used to be, before we all grew up and forgot what mattered. You can stay, I told my family. Watch what this place is supposed to be. Or you can leave and keep pretending nothing's changed. Your choice. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't just taking control, It's restoring something to its true purpose, even if others have forgotten what that purpose was. 3 months after the revelation at the lawyer's office, Lake Windsor sparkled under a perfect summer sunset. The sound of children's laughter mixed with the gentle lapping of waves against the dock, so different from the thumping bass of Audrey's parties that used to echo across the water. I stood on the porch, watching the last sailing class of the day return to shore. Howard Jenkins supervised as the kids properly stowed their gear, teaching them the same respect for equipment and tradition that he'd once taught me. "They're good kids," a familiar voice said behind me. "Quick learners." I turned to find Dad watching the scene, leaning slightly on his cane, a concession to reality he'd finally accepted after the second minor stroke scare. "They appreciate the opportunity," I replied, "unlike some people who took it for granted." He nodded slowly, lowering himself into one of the Adirondack chairs. "Like I took the company for granted?" That was new. Dad admitting mistakes wasn't exactly a family tradition. "The board meeting went well today," I said, taking the chair beside him. "The tech integration plan is ahead of schedule." "So I heard." He managed a small smile. "The stock's up 30% since you took over. The same analysts who used to kiss my golf shoes are now calling you a visionary leader." "Funny how that works." "You know," he turned to face me, "I actually read your original proposal. The one you sent 3 years ago, warning about our technology gap." "You mean the one you dismissed as unnecessary panic and feminine overthinking?" He flinched. "I was wrong. About everything. The company, the lake house, you." Before I could respond, the sound of tires on gravel announced another arrival. Audrey's Mercedes pulled up, but something was different. Instead of her usual designer outfit, she wore simple business casual. Her hair was pulled back practically, and she carried a laptop instead of a designer bag. "Sorry I'm late," she called out, hurrying up the steps. "The coding class ran over." I raised an eyebrow. "Coding class?" She flushed slightly. "After you, after everything, I started taking some courses. Thought I should understand what's actually happening in the company instead of just planning parties." She paused. "The instructor says I have a knack for user interface design." "She does," Dad confirmed. "Been helping the tech team make the new systems more user-friendly. Turns out all those years of social networking taught her something useful about how people interact with technology." I studied my sister, seeing her clearly for maybe the first time. The practiced artifice was gone, replaced by something almost genuine. "The summer program kids miss you," Howard called up from the dock. "They said you promised to teach them about digital navigation systems." Audrey actually brightened. "That's right. I brought the demonstration models." She hurried down to the dock, her practical shoes handling the wooden steps with ease. "She's different," I said quietly. "We all are," Dan replied. "Had to be. You didn't leave us much choice." Mom appeared from inside, carrying a tray of lemonade, not the fancy cocktails she used to insist on, but the same recipe Grandma used to make. "The foundation paperwork is ready," she said, setting down the tray. "The Lake Windsor Youth Education Fund. Full scholarships for sailing and technology programs." She smiled slightly. "I even convinced the country club ladies to donate." Amazing how interested in education they became when they realized you're now one of the richest women in the state. I took a glass of lemonade, watching as Audrey set up her demonstration on the dock. Kids gathered around her, genuinely interested as she explained how modern navigation systems worked. "You know," Dad said thoughtfully, "I never told you about my father, your grandfather, and how he got the lake house." He inherited it, I said. Like you were supposed to inherit it. No, Dad shook his head. He bought it. Secretly, while everyone thought he was failing in business. Built something new while the family thought he was embarrassing them. He looked at me. Sound familiar? I remembered the old photos in the library, the ones I'd actually studied while Audrey used the room for selfie backgrounds. Grandfather William, the one they called Wild Will, because he invested in automobiles when everyone else was still betting on horses. The same, Dad nodded. He waited until the perfect moment, then showed them all who'd really understood the future. He sighed. I forgot that legacy. Got caught up in maintaining instead of building. But you're more like him than anyone. From the dock came a chorus of wow, as Audrey demonstrated something on her tablet. Howard stood nearby, smiling proudly at his newest batch of students. The fall program starts next week, I said. We're adding coding classes to the sailing lessons, teaching kids that technology and tradition can work together. Integration and innovation, Dad mused, just like what you're doing with the company. Speaking of the company, I pulled out my tablet. The board approved my new proposal. We're creating a heritage division, preserving the best of our history while building for the future. It needs a director. He straightened. Catherine, someone who understands both where we came from and where we need to go. Someone who's learned the hard way what happens when you stop innovating. I slid the tablet over. Interested? He picked it up with slightly shaking hands. You trust me, after everything? Trust is earned, I said firmly. Just like respect, just like success. You taught me that once, before you forgot it yourself. Mom appeared with more lemonade, just as Audrey's students broke into applause. The sunset painted everything in gold. The water, the dock, the familiar shingles of the house that had seen generations of winters learn, fail, and grow. I found something in the library, Mom said softly, pulling out an old photograph. From the day your grandfather bought the lake house. The picture showed William Winters standing proudly on these same porch steps, a subtle smile playing on his lips. Behind him, his own family looked on with mixed expressions of shock and dawning respect. History repeats, Dad said, looking from the photo to me. Only if we learn from it, I replied. Down at the dock, Audrey was wrapping up her lesson. The kids helped pack up the equipment, showing the same care Howard had taught me years ago. One young girl lingered, looking up at the house with dreaming eyes. That'll be yours someday, Howard told her, following her gaze. If you work hard and learn well. Ms. Catherine proved that anything's possible here. I smiled, remembering being that girl, having those dreams. The lake house had always been magic, not because of its monetary value or social status, but because of its ability to inspire, to teach, to transform. The next board meeting is Thursday, I told Dad. The Heritage Division presentation is first on the agenda. He nodded, a familiar spark of purpose returning to his eyes. I'll be ready. I know you will be, I said. Just remember, we're not in the business of maintaining anymore. We're in the business of building. As the sun set on another Lake Windsor evening, I watched my family slowly finding their real purpose. Mom organizing educational programs instead of social events. Audrey teaching instead of partying. Dad learning to build again instead of just preserving. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just proving people wrong. It's helping them become right. And as the last light painted the lake in shades of possibility, I knew Grandfather William would have approved. Because true legacy isn't about what you own. It's about what you build, what you teach, and what you leave better than you found it. That's what the lake house had always been meant for. That's what we had all finally learned to see.